Rolling film.
We're shooting.
Ladies and gentlemen, here we are with Gordon Bruce Frank. We have, in the past, had some archive footage of the early years of Mr. Frank here, and one thing that we're going to try to do now is go through 29 years in 10 minutes of his career with all of his adventures, the cities. Oh my God, that'll be hard pressed.
That's
just
2 hours, yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to try to condense this. So I love you, Pops. What do you got to say about that?
Highlights of IBM, 29 years, 1963, walking down the street looking for my next job in Cleveland, Ohio. I'd had a couple interviews with good companies. I was working for a subsidiary of Bell & Howell called Ditto Incorporated. Knocked on IBM's door, never even heard of IBM before, and was interviewed by the local branch manager who said, I don't have an opening here, but would you be interested in Cincinnati, Ohio? I said, sure, without asking Adri, and the guy flew up the next day from Cincinnati. Willman was his name, a former defensive tackle for the Chicago Bears, a big hulking guy, super personality. He was the marketing manager who was going to hire me. He hired me. We moved to Cincinnati. Somebody had given us an address to look at an apartment, which was already rented. So I called the information operator in Cincinnati. You'll get a kick out of this, Tommy. I gave her the name of the person I was trying to call, and she said, please. I said, you're welcome. She said, no, what is the name again? And I found out 10 years later that this was German for bitte, which is please, which means excuse me, which means please repeat yourself. So super salesman in Cincinnati for 6 years.
100% club?
5 100% clubs.
Tell everybody just briefly, what is a 100% club?
When you exceed your quota by X number of percentage, and then you make the golden circle. So I had a golden circle in San Francisco, I think, with Hal Wygant.
Now let's talk just for a second. We talked the other night about how in the 60s, IBM was selling a dream. They were selling a technology that hadn't existed previously, and I'll let you fill in the blanks here.
Well, I was a new account salesman. Big companies already had IBM computers. The punch card was common. But what was new was small systems, refurbished systems sold to new accounts, and that was my bag. And I did things that had never been done. I was selling 10, 12 new accounts a year. The previous record was 3 or 4. My last 3 months before I got promoted, I sold 6 in 3 months, which was on track for 24 that year, making a ton of money. Took a 50% pay cut to go to Boca Raton with Tommy, who jumped on my back, and I was never the same after that.
And
exuberance.
Do you remember what we used to call those fights?
Batman fights, yeah.
This is about the time that Batman was on TV, and I took a flying leap off of the couch onto Gordy's back, and perhaps ruptured his vertebrae.
Well, my back was bad from the time I was in high school, working to install oil burners in place of coal burning furnaces. So 6 years in Cincinnati, marvelous years, excellent years. Towanda Terrace, went down to Boca for 2 years. Adri didn't like Boca Raton.
Explain selling the dream, though. What did that mean?
Well, that's your term, Tommy.
They were going from a punch card industry.
No, they were going from pencil and paper, those customers. So to convince someone that you could take your CPA accountant or your in-house person and replace them, really, with a different system was a hard sell. And some people got it, some people didn't. One of the best sales calls I ever made was on probably a 35-year-old son of a entrepreneur that had started some kind of a business, I don't remember. And when I got to the point where he was convinced that he wanted to sell his father on this idea, he said to me something I've never forgotten. He says, you're a breath of fresh air. And that was the whole thing.
So, after that, Cincinnati, all that success in Cincinnati, then going down to Boca Raton.
Yeah. Made a name for myself in doing surveys for small systems across the country. Got promoted in that job. Went to Germany for 2 years, Paris for 4 years.
Waldenbuch, Stuttgart,
We lived in the city of Birmingham for 2 years.
Birmingham. I forgot about you.
Birmingham
Right.
for a year. I was in a meeting in Munich, and I get a call from Adri that says, the moving company is here moving us out of our house. I said, don't let them do it. She couldn't stop them, and we wound up, when I came back from that Munich trip, we were living in a house in Waldenbuch, home of Ritter's Sport Chocolate. You remember Ritter's Sport Chocolate?
I'll tell you what, they sell it all over the U.S., and it's still a damn good chocolate.
It's a great chocolate. So 4 years in Paris.
So what were you doing with IBM in Paris?
In Paris, I had 2 jobs. One was IBM France, that paid us a pension that I collected 20 years later. And the IBM Committee d'Entreprise had camps for kids and ski camps, ski resorts for adults. For like
But you were no longer in sales at this point.
No, now I'm in headquarters.
So you were an executive handling groups of employees?
No, groups of customers.
Groups of customers.
Yeah, I was in something called the MAP, Major Application Expansion Program. We took the top 10 customers in Europe, and we made them feel like they were part of this is before focus groups. What is it called? What are focus?
Focus groups, yeah.
Focus groups to help IBM find out where we needed to do better and do more. Anyway, that was 4 years in Paris, maybe the 4 best years of my IBM career.
Great
Loved it.
food at the IBM cafeteria.
Unbelievable
They
food.
had wine. Which was standard in France. When as a little kid, I was like, God, these guys got wine in their cafeteria.
Yeah.
In
wine.
fact, even at American School of Paris, they had wine in the cafeteria for the teachers.
Sure. And what were those every Sunday we went to a different museum.
Right.
Because the museums were free. And
Yep.
what was the name of the guy? You remember him?
Kingsley.
Mr. Kingsley.
And guess what? He's still around. And I'm Facebook friends with Chris Chater. Is that a remember name?
Yeah.
Mr. Chater. And I told him, I asked him, I said, is Mr. Kingsley still around? And he said he would love to hear from you.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So you did? You contacted him?
No, he said he would love to hear from you.
Oh.
I dreaded all those weekend tours to the museums. But I learned a lot. In fact, I was able to correctly identify pointillism.
Good for you.
We're
Wow.
doing fine. All right, so you've left France, you come back, you go to Atlanta.
Let's talk about the adventure back from Paris. We came back on the Queen Elizabeth II, QE2 they called it. I convinced IBM that instead of us flying back to some airport in New York, that the economics with a car and a dog and a cat and 4 kids and a wife, that it would be cheaper to go by boat. So I did a business case. I showed him it was about $500 cheaper to go by boat than by air. So we took the QE2. Remember that?
I have vivid memories. In fact, there's a nice picture where I have my very first vanishing cane, where I'm wearing a little hat and my pleather jacket.
I remember that. So I was on my way to Atlanta. I had already found a job in Atlanta. IBM was so unique. When you left an assignment like that, you found your own job anywhere in the world that you could. In fact, that's how I stayed in Paris for 4 years, stayed in Europe for 6 years. You find your next job, but the limit for international assignments was 5 years. They wanted everybody back in the States after 5 years being gone because nobody knew you anymore in the States, or your skills or your reputation. So I found this great job in Atlanta. Spent a couple of years in the Executive Briefing Center with Hal Wygant, and got a call one night about midnight. Tokyo time was probably noon, asking me if I wanted to go to Japan. It's 1984 now. Left Paris in 76. So we were in the States.
So talk a little bit about the Executive Briefing Center in Atlanta and a little bit of going into marketing education.
Well, the Briefing Center was totally different. The Briefing Center was bringing the top executives, the CEOs, CFOs, CEOs, to a luncheon in Atlanta where you sat down with the president of the division, Jack Rogers, later became the executive of Equifax. The disaster of the Equifax fame is still current. And anyway, that led to people knowing me, that I could run meetings, etc. We got 10 minutes yet. And went to Japan for 3 years, 84 to 87. Tommy came over and did a
Magic
lecture with notes,
Well,
English notes.
And that were transcribed in kanji by Tono Osaka. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Yeah. So that was a great experience.
21 years old I was.
Came back from Japan in 87, into marketing education, ran a,
What does that mean, marketing education?
you're teaching IBMers how to market.
And you
I
used
do.
videos to help do that.
Did videotape them in live calls.
Role-playing sales
Role-playing,
calls.
Yeah. Tommy will remember the way I taught a salesman to shut up and listen was by putting their fingers over their lips, because most people want to talk rather than listen.
I
don't
do
know
that
if-
to this day.
Yeah, I hope you do. And got a call, no, didn't get a call, pursued a job in Germany, went to Germany from 89 to 91 with Folke and I guess Mark and Jennifer. Thomas was already in college, yeah. Thomas was going to the Atlanta Art Institute. So that was the IBM career, 29 years in a nutshell. Came back in 91, retired in 92.
Fantastic.